Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Green Business Fund technical webinar, Employee Engagement and Behavior Change. So before we get started, I'll just go over a couple of things. So you've all joined in listen-only mode, but you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions throughout the presentation by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll collect these questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end. Also, we will be sending around the slides to attendees after the webinar. So now I'd like to introduce Nadia Montoto from the Carbon Trust.
Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining in. So yes, today we're going to be talking about employee engagement and behavior change. I'm going to go through the slides first and then we can discuss any questions that you may have. So let's get started. First, a little bit about us, the Carbon Trust. So the Carbon Trust was set up by the UK government in 2001 as an expert organization to help the UK move to a low carbon economy. And since 2011, we became independent. So now we not only help the UK government, but we can also help other governments and companies around the world. We are a mission-driven organization. Our mission is to accelerate the move to a sustainable low carbon economy. And we are a not for dividend company, which means that any profits that we make, we reinvest to expand our business. So we provide services to governments, the public sector, companies in the UK, internationally. We do certification and footprinted work that looks at the impact of organizations and their products and services. We also have expertise working with new technologies in the renewable energy sector. We are very strong in offshore wind, and we are also very strong in energy systems. We have about 200 employees around the world. We have offices in the UK. Our headquarters are in London, but we have offices also in Wales and Scotland. And we have offices in South Africa, China, Mexico, Brazil, and recently, that's why they're not in the map yet, but we opened offices in Amsterdam and Singapore, and we also have presence in Washington, DC. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about employee engagement and behavior change, and this is the agenda that we're going to go through. We're going to discuss the case for action, resource awareness, key trends, things that you need to know to have a successful behavior change campaign, and some other resources that the Carbon Trust can help you with apart from this presentation. Okay, the case for action. So why engage with your employees? But before we address that, what is employee engagement? And when we talk about employee engagement, we talk about the extent to which employees put discretionary effort into their work, the extent to which employees are committed to the organization and feel passionate about their jobs. So obviously you're more likely to put discretionary effort into work if you're committed to the organization, if its values align to your own. But when I talk about discretionary effort in this context, I'm talking about the efforts that employees are willing to make to help contribute to energy savings, cost savings, carbon savings. And why engage with your employees? Basically because it has a lot of benefits for the organization. First of all, it helps you reduce operating costs. So we know that employees can help with reducing energy cost, carbon, water usage, waste disposal. From our Carbon Trust experience, we think that organizations are able to achieve between 5 and 15% energy savings through better employee engagement. And we run this very general estimation, but we say that if an organization is able to make about 50% cuts in energy costs, that would be for small businesses equal to increasing your sales about 3.5%. So again, a 15% energy saving would be equal to a 3.5 energy sale bump. It's a generalization, mostly applicable for smaller businesses, but it's something that you can take into account just to see the impact that reducing operating costs can have in your business. It also improves brand and loyalty. About 51% of customers say that they would boycott a company based on its green credentials. It helps you on your leadership on carbon reduction. It helps you comply with the standards, because at the end of the day, it's employees, the ones that are going to be in charge of switching machinery on and off, for example, and things like that. And it motivates your employees. Motivated staff means higher staff retention. So that is something that is always very desirable. And here is just some examples of the most typical areas where your employees can have an influence. Some influence you may be able to measure. It's more data driven. But honestly, most of the behavior employees you won't be able to influence at all. And that's why we call it sort of fluffy. But it's very important to be aware of that, to see what is it that you can do and what is it that you can do it and where to concentrate your efforts. So for example, in the case of timings and temperature, that can be process control. You can have a little machine that helps with the timing and the temperature, and that's easy to control and to measure. In the case of timings, it's not a very contentious subject. People don't really care that much about the timings unless they have to work on the weekends or come in early or leave work late. But it's rare that there is significant tension. But for example, temperature is a highly contentious subject in an office environment, just because people in general feel very different about it. People may feel more cold, people may feel more warm naturally. So if you want to get significant savings, you need to make the case that there is a benefit to having temperature warmer in the summer and colder in the winter. And as you can imagine, that sometimes cannot be that easy to do, but you can back it with some recommendation, official recommendation, and you can say that according to the Chartered Institution of Building Service Engineers in the UK, temperature in an office or in a sedentary workspace should be around 21 degrees. If you are in an active place of work, say in a gym, it could be the recommended temperature is 14 degrees. Or if you're in a light activity area, some sort of factory activity, you can set up that to 19 degrees. Now, it doesn't look like much of a difference, but overheating by 1 degree can increase consumption by 8%, heating consumption by 8%. And on the other hand, reducing heating and cooling 1 hour per day will save you around 10% of expenditure. So these are things that don't seem that big difference, big changes, but actually can have an impact in your cost savings as well. Employees can also help you switch on and off stuff. Here, this is really applicable to large pieces of machinery, like conveyor belts or generators. Asking employees to be mindful about mobile phone chargers and things like that won't have a big influence. But yes, for bigger pieces of machinery. And then travel. Now, travel, as you may know, can be a huge contribution to carbon footprint. And you can have a policy around travel. You can say we don't do business travel if under 4 hours, for example. But generally speaking, this is it's a very tough area to control or to influence from an environmental point of view, because the decisions on traveling are really mandated by the business needs. So you can measure it. Sometimes it's difficult, but you can measure it. But it's quite hard to influence. So it's a very tough conversation to have. It's important to start having it because of the difference that it can make in the carbon footprint. And there are still things that you can do, like investing in an IT kit, for example, for video conferencing, and having that expenditure then compensated by saving on some international flights, for example. And another area where employees can really help is waste as well, waste management. So this slide here, I like to introduce because it sort of gives a framework that you can use when you start to think about behavior campaigns. It's usually used when thinking strategically about the things, and it's called COMBI, and it refers to what is involved in affecting certain behavior. So the C is for capability, and that is thinking about employees. Do they have a power to change things? So for example, if you're talking about office temperature, if employees are not able to change the temperature, then there isn't much they could do about saving energy from reducing heat or air conditioning. So that's the C, capability. Then the O is for opportunity, and this is more from the organization side. Do employees have an opportunity to participate, for example, in a focus group to discuss ideas on how to reduce energy consumption? The M is for motivation. Do they have the motivation to change their behavior? And what are the benefits of changing behavior to them? Judge your audience. Not everyone will come up on board just on climate change or environmental concerns. So, for example, you could say, you can stress that turning off fans is good for reduction of office noise, instead of saying that it's going to be energy saving, just because people need to feel motivated for that change to happen. So all of these affect behavior, and here are some examples of how you can influence this. So for example, for influencing capability, you can help making the wrong behavior harder and the right behavior easier. So here there's a photo of bins that, if you see at the top, they have restricted shapes on the top. So that encourages employees to recycle the right product in the right bin, for example. And the other one is labeling the lighting so that they would know which switches to turn on and off and help contribute to lighting savings. For influencing opportunity, it's just all about creating chances for employees to act on. So you could introduce a cycle to work scheme that reduces travel needs, and also it reduces your need to have infrastructure such as car parks. And similarly, you could also help facilitate carpools within your organization. All of those create opportunities for your employees. On the motivation side, you can influence that as well. Here we put an example of a printer. So you can place printers farther away from employees, and that helps reduce paper consumption. So for example, in our offices here in London in the Carbon Trust, we select print from our computers, and then we have to walk to the printer, which isn't close to our computers, and then we have to log in with our special code and select to print again. So there are little more steps than just pressing a button and finding the paper in the machinery, and that help us really think. It gives us another chance to think whether printing this document is really necessary. So that affects motivation. Now, all of the initiatives that you are going to take are going to be classified as incentives or penalties. As you can imagine, incentives are much more successful at influencing behavior. Here we can see this matrix showing some examples of initiatives and how they are classified. There are some that are a little bit harder than others. Turning down air conditioning without having a conversation with employees can be a little bit more aggressive than perhaps setting up the printer for a double-sided default, and if employees don't want to print double-sided, they can just turn it off. The idea is that the initiatives that you take would go sort of on the HAG part of the matrix, because the other three are not really employee engagement, because the employees don't have much control over them. But if you can find your initiatives if you can make them fit in the HAG sort of area, then that will allow employees making more active and more conscious decisions while being rewarded. So that is the ideal scenario that you want to find your policies in. Now we're going to talk about resource awareness. Now you know what constitutes employee engagement, some elements of influencing behavior, some ideas for initiatives, but how do you go designing an employee engagement campaign? No, what are your resources? What is the awareness that employees already have? And there are 3 steps to follow, really, in the design of a campaign. And this will give you a framework to develop your process, to order your ideas as well. The steps that we are going to discuss now are research and planning, delivery of the program, and monitoring. So we're going to go into detail in this, starting with research and planning. And this is all about data gathering and goal settings. So when you are data gathering, you need 2 sets of data, quantitative and qualitative. When we talk about quantitative data, we're talking about, electricity consumption, heating usage. It's very relatively straightforward to gather that kind of data from bills or invoices. But for qualitative data, you have to speak to your staff. It is very important to involve them from the very beginning of the campaigns that you start to develop. You can engage with them through surveys, focus groups, workshops that can be used to understand current behaviors and explore how they can be changed. And the qualitative data can give you a list of some issues that are relevant to staff. But you have to be a little bit mindful that when you do focus groups, then the answers that you will get skewed towards the more vocal people. So backing up qualitative research with quantitative data will help you organize the information that you get. So for example, after a focus group, you could also run an organization-wide questionnaire that can give you a feel for how widely held each belief is across the organization. And when you run these sort of workshops or focus groups or engagement with your employees, wherever you may go for, it's also a great opportunity to identify who are the key staff that you have to engage with. Who are the people that are placed in strategic areas that will help you make the biggest change in behavior? Also, who are the green champions? So who are those employees that are committed to go the extra mile and are willing to become a point of reference for other employees on these subjects? It's very important also that you enlist senior support. You have to have the support from the right people, and employees should feel that the initiatives that they're going to do on, say, reducing carbon or energy consumption are not against or in conflict with their daily responsibilities. So that is why senior support is very important. And also it will start to give you an insight of what are the communication channels that you should start using. So once you've done your research and planning, you set up your targets. And this is a list of the target attributes, what they should be like, right? You can check this later, you're going to receive these slides. But they should be obviously relevant to the organization aims. They have to be backed by reliable data, verifiable, timely, well-defined, comparable. So yes, the organization, the target should be aligned with organizational goals. If you have an environmental policy, for example, it's important that you try to align your campaign with that environmental policy. And think of what you are trying to achieve very specifically. Is the campaign about saving carbon? Is the campaign about saving costs, saving energy consumption? Make that very specific, and also see how realistic the goals that you set are. If you are going to run a policy that tackles behavior towards, I don't know, transport, and you have offices in the middle of Wales, then perhaps you can do car sharing initiatives. But it will be a little bit hard to try to convince employees to take public transportation, for example. And also think about what needs to happen in order to achieve the goals. Here there are a few things that you can consider, like what behaviors do you think are causing most waste toward that outcome, and how should that change? Or once you have identified what needs to change, think about the goals and motivations of people who will have to change. So we'll dive into this more into the delivery phase, but here I put in this slide so that you can have a quick checklist to make sure that you are on track on everything that you need for research and planning at this stage. So as I was mentioning before, for once you've done your research and planning, you can start implementing your campaign. Think about the kind of communication channels that you will be using. Think about whether you need to customize your approach and language so that it speaks to different people. As I was telling you before, you'll be surprised. A lot of people are not motivated just by climate change and saving carbon and saving energy. So judge your audience. Like, for example, what are people trying to achieve in their work? And what do they care about in their work environment? If you can identify that, that is a huge advantage in the way in which you will be able to communicate your message. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we worked with an NHS hospital, and we helped them to design an energy saving program. So then we asked that question, what motivates people in a hospital? And the main driver is the patient benefit. So what we did is we highlighted the benefit of energy saving behaviors to patients. We didn't say energy savings are gonna have an impact in your costs, because they don't really care that much about costs. They do care about patients' well-being. So we targeted nurses more than doctors for our messages to come through, because nurses are the ones that spend more time with patients, entering and leaving rooms and things like that. So instead of saying turning off the lights will save 35% of electric usage, we said turning off lights when leaving a room will help reduce light pollution and help patients sleep. So again, it was all about targeting the audience, targeting the message, and help them make those decisions easier and in line with their work. So instead of also saying be mindful about the temperature in the room because it will save you 25% in consumption, we said that closing doors behind you will help regulate room temperature for patient comfort, reduce noise, offer greater privacy, and improve patient safety. So again, it was all about tailoring the message. And that is the key. See what people care about and tailor your delivery message to what they care about. Another issue also to consider is timing. Obviously, see when you run the programs. You're not going to run a heating saving campaign in the middle of the summer, or you're not going to send an email early in the morning reminding people to switch off monitors at the end of the day. You're probably going to send that email closer to the end of the day. All of those things that are worth considering. Okay, so here are examples of employee engagement and what your communication channels could be. And you can use any of these: emails, quiz, green champions, notice boards, everything that is displayed in there. What I would recommend is to put, and here I put it as a tip, that people respond well to visual data. So whatever employee engagement communication channel you choose, make sure that there's something visually attached to it. Like I have something here from the University of de Montfort in Leicester. It's a study that they ran, and they looked at how people reacted to information about the energy use of the building where they were at. So when the building was performing well, they'd see a happy gorilla with a blue sky. And when the building was performing badly, they'll see an unhappy gorilla with gloomy surroundings. So the study found that visual data or visual imagery that gives emotional cues can be more effective than words or numbers in getting building users to change their behavior. So you can find imagery also to communicate what are the results of the campaigns that you're running. Using happy faces or sad faces, maybe a little bit easier than using happy gorillas. So it's a good idea to take this into mind, because it can have an impact more than just words or numbers. So here, some campaign tips. We went through a few of these. Just keep in mind, again, a lot of people won't be motivated to act on climate change. So when you're having discussions with your staff or you are developing engagement materials, you should talk about the benefits that changing the behavior will have to staff. Everyone has their primary role at work, which they're under pressure to deliver. So you have to make sure that behavior change initiatives will help staff achieve their objectives and not go against them. So again, going back to the hospital example, you could say that ensuring that room temperatures don't go above 25 degrees will prevent germs from spreading. And that is something that they will understand, they will care about, but also it will give you the benefit of them being mindful about savings in heating. Just make it very easy for people to change behavior. That is a top tip. So here again, a checklist to make sure you're on the right track in the delivery section. And finally, the third step of the process is all about monitoring. Once you have designed the program and run it, you should have access, you have to assess the impact of the program. You have to get feedback from staff, whether things are working or not. Employee engagement should always be a two-way communication, and you need your employees engaged from the beginning until the end. So once you receive feedback, you should incorporate that straight away into the program, just to make them feel involved and that you're listening, and then run the program again. And it's a continuous loop of feedback. If the campaign didn't work as you thought it would, find out why by speaking to staff, and you should make improvements to the campaign. So it's not a one-off and it's done. It's an ongoing program. So monitoring and feedback is really vital for the campaign to work. Here again, another checklist that you can go through later, just to make sure that you are in track for the monitoring stage. So here, important as well. You went through all of this effort, you engaged your employees, you put a lot of time and work in it, and you achieved something. Fantastic. Now communicate it. Communicate it externally and communicate it internally. As we said at the very beginning, client loyalty is very important. So communicate it to clients, communicate it to investors as well. Tell of all of your efforts in reports, align them with the sustainability report if you have one. And also communicate it internally. Show the employees the benefits, the results of their efforts. Show them with visual data, congratulate them when they've been very supportive. Try to be nice when you have to communicate bad news. Try to put everything always on a positive light to keep them motivated. And also a tip that you can use here is when you engage with employees internally, you can also give them tips about how they can translate a lot of the behavior that you are encouraging in the office in their own homes. They could adopt similar initiatives for energy saving at home. And that's a very nice gesture and a very good thing to do, because it will also motivate staff and can make employees feel that the employer cares about their well-being. So also very important. Okay, and here are some behavior change campaigns that have been successful and what do they require. Basically, just go through the steps. This is a summary of what we discussed, from collecting the data to getting the support that you need, to creating the campaign, making it targeted to the right audience and getting the feedback. And remember that behavior change does not happen overnight. So you need to allocate resources and think about timeframes and be mindful that it will be an ongoing process. So these are some final thoughts for a successful campaign. Pick the right behaviors that are focused. Identify who the key staff are. For example, who is currently responsible for energy or carbon management. Just make sure that the right people lead the right behavior that you need to change. So if you want energy saving with regard to computer use, make sure that the IT people are involved. How you're going to think about your message, how they're going to be tailored. Identify the key communication channels, emails, newsletters, advice on the intranet, whatever it might be. Remember again that a lot of people won't be motivated to act to prevent climate change. So ensure that behavior change initiatives talk about the benefits to staff, make it easier for people to change their behaviors, and obtain senior management support as well. Having opening discussions with the staff is a must. And you have to have these two-way discussions with the staff to understand their behaviors first, and then design and run the program and receive their feedback. So you could incorporate that into the program. It's a continuous loop. So those are the final thoughts. And this is what I got at the moment on behavior change and employee engagement. But what I want to talk to you now briefly is about other resources that we have at the Carbon Trust that you can access, that they're free, and they will help you complement the information that you got from today. So here is a list. I selected these four. There's much more in our website, but these are free guides that you can download, that they have employee engagement materials. You can see some examples for posters and stickers. It's all very helpful, and I encourage you to have a look at those. And also, I wanted to talk to you about the Green Business Fund. Now, this webinar is happening in the framework of this Green Business Fund that we run at the Carbon Trust. So we operate this scheme to contribute to and improve sustainability and energy efficiency. It serves smaller businesses in England and Wales. Everybody can join these webinars, but we have some other tools that eligible companies can access. So the Green Business Fund is available to small and medium-sized business, schools, sole traders, and charities in England and Wales. Businesses need to meet 2 of the 3 criteria described in there, and they do not have to have more than 25% of the business is owned by an entity which does not meet the criteria. Through the Green Business Fund, you can get energy efficiency training. We run 2-hour workshops. They're run by experts in the Carbon Trust, and they run all across the UK. There you can see the dates and the places of the upcoming ones. So if you are near there, I would recommend to attend. They're very good. They're very helpful. They're on energy efficiency. We also offer opportunity assessments. All of this is free if you apply. The only thing you have to do is apply and fulfill the criteria. But with the opportunity assessments, you can get to speak to a carbon trust engineer, and they will give you tailored advice on how to save energy in your company. You can also apply if you have an idea or a program that you want to run. You can apply to for up to 5 days of support from a consultant from the Carbon Trust that can help you run the project that you are thinking of. You can access webinars like this one and also more technical ones. Keep an eye. We talk about specific technologies, for example, that you may be interested in. They're all in our website and they're coming quite often. So keep an eye on those webinars as well. A lot of publications that you can get free from our website. And also the Green Business Fund has recently released a set of free energy saving tools that can be found on our website. And here, this is a fantastic tool because you can measure your carbon footprint for free. You can benchmark your energy use, and you can build your business case for lighting upgrades. So it's a very good tool to have in mind as well. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we're going to take a couple of minutes in case you want to send some questions. So feel free to write away. Great, thank you. We received quite a bit of questions, so I'm going to try to go through all of them as quickly as I can. There is one about giving more example of successful campaigns. And sure, yeah, I gave you the example of the hospital, was more sort of focused on energy saving, but I could give you one that was more focused on waste. So we know that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office here in the UK, in the London headquarters, have introduced a strong single-use plastic policy. So what they did in the cafeteria, for example, is changing the providers of the coffee mugs, the plastic coffee mugs, and they introduced compostable ones. But what they did towards behavior change is they made it possible for employees to either buy one of those reusable cups or bring their own. And so they charge, I think it's £1.75 when employees bring their own cup, and £2.25 when employees use these compostable cups. And the 50p difference goes to complement a fund that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has, so that embassies around the world can apply to get that money, so that they can implement waste reduction policies in their own countries. So I thought that was quite a good example to talk about tackling waste and the things that you could do. And also they have this thing that they will give employees the opportunity to bring their own bottles, and they will fill them with carbonated drinks instead of having to use cans every time they buy a Coke, for example. And they present the results also in a visual way. So they say, with the cups that we saved in the last 6 months, I mean, the cups that we saved could take us from London to Brighton, for example, like trying to contextualize the data, and they put that visually so that employees can see what is the contribution that they're doing. I thought it was a good campaign to highlight. There are more questions. Yeah.
Okay, so another question here is, could you please repeat the ideal temperature for an open office environment where there's no manufacturing or heavy machinery?
Yes, so the recommendation is 21 degrees for an office. That's what the chartered engineers say in the UK. And it's 14 degrees when there is a very active environment, and 19 degrees when there is light activity. So those are the temperatures.
Okay, and then someone asked about the just more information about the Green Business Fund, specifically the capital contribution, if the capital contributions are going to become available in the future and when. So there are no plans at this time to have another capital contribution program, but not to say that it couldn't happen in the future, but there's no plans at this time for that. However, we do have all of our other services available through the Green Business Fund, like the remote assessments, as well as our implementation advice. And then also about Green Business Fund, can I recommend Green Business Fund to my suppliers? What's the equivalent for Scotland? So yes, you can recommend the Green Business Fund to your suppliers as long as they meet the criteria. That's absolutely fine. They can apply for the scheme. And the equivalent for Scotland is Resource Efficiency Scotland. So if anyone is in Scotland and is interested in these type of services, they do similar work. So you can just find that online, Resource Efficiency Scotland. And then another question, are you happy for me to share the presentation with other businesses? Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, that's totally fine. No problem.
And next question.
Yeah, so it's a long one. I'm going to read it out. It says how to communicate these different messages in the same organization. For example, cost reductions versus purely carbon reductions, as there are different motivations for different staff members. So using the same channels and same communication piece with a number of different motivators or completely different engagement pieces and channels. Well, it depends on how big your organization is, and what is the time also that you have allocated to take these tasks, because as you can see, the campaign can be very time consuming. If you have very radical activities that your employees do, for example, if you're in a company where 30% of the employees are in an office and 70% are in a plant, for example, producing something, then yes, you will probably need different channels of communication and try to identify what motivates them. It may be different. But generally, just think of what the core of the business is, because usually people are interested in what they're doing. So think of what is the core of the business and try to deduct from there what could be the motivation that you can use to tailor your messages. That's what I'd say. But it's complicated without knowing what your business is all about. But that could be a piece of advice in general. And then in design, there's another question. In designing a campaign, there seems to be quite a lot of work for someone to do. Yes, especially things like collecting quantitative and qualitative data. Yeah. So what would you suggest are key opportunities for SMEs that do not have the staff resources for someone to spend much time on this type of thing? Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. That's why I also mentioned these green champions things, people. If you could identify these key people that are personally interested in making a difference in climate change. They could be your best allies to run this together. It's a matter of trying to see what is the time that you can allocate realistically and how you can make the best use of it. The good news about being in an SME is that there are not that many employees to influence, perhaps. Um, so perhaps your campaigns will be able to get that sort of immediate feedback from employees that you would need and will make things go faster and more smoothly. But I'd say that getting senior support, because usually in SMEs people are very time constrained, and it's hard to stop doing what you're doing to do something else. So getting senior support and identifying these green champions, so the employees that can also help you, are two things that you could take into account. And yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so that's all the questions we have time for today. So if anyone has any further questions, you can feel free to email them through at a later time. So I'll just say thanks a lot to Nadia for presenting today, and thanks everyone for attending, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.